North Vietnamese also fielded some armored personnel carriers, APCs, such as the BTR-50. Based on a PT-76 chassis, the amphibious vehicle traveled on land at a top speed of 27 miles per hour. Along with 2 crewmen and 20 troops, the BTR-50 could carry a heavy machine gun. 20 troops, that's quite a few to put in there. Roof hatches ensured that dismounting the vehicle under fire was dangerous, and the thin armor offered little protection to the troops inside. The safest tank in the world is the tank that the Jewish have built, the Israeli state has made, and it's actually got an escape hatch in the back. The back end of the tank drops down. All right. Now we're going to go on about something, the Easter invasion. We're going to go on about it for a minute here. Exactly at noon on Holy Thursday, an incoming artillery round hit the 3rd Division's headquarters at AITU Combat Base just north of the Quang Tri. There was something new in the sound. The split second between the sharp crack of the incoming shell and its explosion meant that it came from one of the new high-velocity 130mm howitzers emplaced by the NVA along the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. As Christopher Hitchens says, why do we call it the demilitarized zone? It's one of the most heavily militarized borders on the planet. A mortar or a rocket round would have given the defenders a few seconds to judge the flight of the incoming fire and leap for cover. The new weapon provided no such warning. The first shell was followed by a barrage over a wide front, and soon the drum fire of communist artillery was reaching outposts and bases along the 30-kilometer ARVN defensive line below the DMZ. The shelling went on for 6 days. The enemy smothered the Allied positions with perfectly targeted fire. They knew the positions so well, what they were aiming at. The rounds fell so fast that the ARVN gunners abandoned their artillery pieces for refuge in bunkers or on the back sides of hills. It did little good for them to shoot back, since many of the NVA guns stood at least 2,000 meters beyond the range of the ARVN 105 and 155mm howitzers. So even if they tried to return fire, they wouldn't have been able to hit. Under cover of the artillery barrage, 30,000 North Vietnamese troops and more than 200 tanks, the equivalent of 3 divisions, charged across the demilitarized zone that had been established 16 years before in Geneva. Thank you, Geneva. You just almost were able to save us from war. Bullshit. Bullshit. Demilitarized zones and shaking hands and making deals with corrupt regimes doesn't ever work. Look at this. We agree. We agree with the North Vietnamese. We got them to sit down in Geneva with us. We're not going to attack across this border. We're going to leave this border sacrosanct. No. They're going to build up on that border. Somebody is really upset at this Vietnam series. Moron named Hyper Suton, or Suton. That's his handle. He says, don't you get it? If we would just stop using physical violence to get things, war would end. I get it. I got that. Now, don't you get it? Someone's always going to want to use force. Don't you get it? Come on, you're stuck in kindergarten. There's always going to be some idiot, moron out there who thinks that he can get something using physical force. And sometimes it's in the service of an ideology like Islam or Marxism, for example. And sometimes they just do it to get rich. It used to just be booty raids. They would just raid other cities for booties in the ancient world. For booty. And booties, too. They'd take their daughters. This, too. Yes, I get it. I get it. War is terrible, and if we would just quit using physical force, we could stop using war. Great. Now go tell, the communists and the fanatical Muslims that. You don't have to tell me. The only difference is I know how we fight these people. You think we lay down and say, oh, let's all be nice. No. You get your guns. Alright, to continue. Just show you what it means to make an agreement that you're not going to fight. They will use that area to build up their military strength. Supported by regiments of tanks and artillery, the North Vietnamese the North Vietnamese flooding through the DMZ followed Russian-style mobile tactics and patterns of assault. So it's no surprise to us. We know where they got the training, where they got the weapons, etc. Anti-aircraft weapons, many of heavy caliber, mounted on tracked vehicles, moved forward in successive lines to protect command posts, logistics and fuel sites, and troop assembly areas from those few aircraft that could attack through the holes in the rainy, low-ceiling weather. So they didn't have control of the air, so it was to their advantage to attack during bad weather. Under this pounding, sizable units of the mixed and disorganized regiments of the ARVN 3rd Division, driven from their guns within the first 48 hours, began falling back from their positions. So a retreat begins. Now we skip about a paragraph. The North Vietnamese Army had initially struck from the north, but that attack was to be only the first of 3. As the U.S. and the GVN reacted to the attack across the DMZ, 2 southern prongs, each with a corps of 3 10,000-man regular divisions, planned their separate advances out of Cambodia towards Saigon in early April and by mid-month into the Central Highlands. Great. We're not going to fight in Laos. We're not going to fight in Cambodia. We're going to limit the war to Vietnam. Great. So now they send divisions of tens of thousands of men out of those safety zones into Vietnam. Okay. Ultimately, the 3 attacks would employ the equivalent of over 14 divisions, the greatest offensive since 300,000 Chinese volunteers had swept across the Yalu River into Korea during the winter of 50-51. Huge push, mechanized, backed by Russian weaponry. Now they're going to try to hold, quote, South Vietnamese might have time to cross the critical bridges, set up the defensive lines behind the Qua Viet and Cam Lo rivers, and hold off the invaders at the first natural line of defense south of the DMZ, the first place that geography would allow them. Okay, that's their plan. So they're going to hold up at the bridge called the Dong Hae. Now we skip quite a bit down. Now they're going to destroy the bridge and make their stand on the far side of the river. So Turley, the guy, the U.S. Marine who was in charge of this, and he has to make the decision, yeah, okay, we got to destroy it. Here's what Turley says. He had never before wrestled with such a responsibility. He made a decision. Smock, he said to his buddy, advisor guy, I can't give this kind of approval, but that bridge must be destroyed. So they've got to do it. Ripley and Smock took explosives and clambered into the bridge girders, braving enemy small arms fire and occasional mortar and artillery shelling. Ripley hung from support and hand-walked several meters, hanging 20 feet above the river until he reached some key structural cross pieces. Smock labored with the boxes of TNT and C4 explosives, shoving them piece after piece to Ripley, who wired them to the bridge supports as enemy riflemen fired at them from across the river. They're under fire the whole time. After many tense minutes beneath the highway bridge, the pair moved to the railroad bridge about 50 meters downstream and wired it for destruction. Then they scrambled back to the embankment. The first attempt to detonate the explosives failed. The enemy columns were again moving toward them. Ripley climbed out, rewired the explosives, replaced faulty electrical detonators with time detonators. The charges again failed to go off. 2 VNAF A-1s tried to slow the NVA Tings, but as the second aircraft made its attack, one of the handheld SA-7 Strela missiles shot out of the enemy column and smashed the aircraft. The sacrifice, however, gave Ripley time to try again. This time he succeeded. The bridges blew up and dropped below into the river. Now that would be intense, and you would hardly believe it if it happened on a Hollywood thriller, right? Detonate. Oh, shit. Climb out there under enemy fire, come back again, detonate again. No. Shit. Damn it. Climb back out there under enemy you wouldn't believe it if we were in a movie. But it actually happened. Alright, so we skip down to the next page in a section called Intrigue at Camp Carroll, but we're not doing the whole thing, we're just taking a paragraph here. Din Phong and other members of the 56th Regiment staff had been talking to the NVA by radio